members, it's a great pleasure to see all of you. You have logged in time. We welcome you to this series of our webinar, a very, very interesting topic that we have for you this week. My name is Tom Nguru, Head of Business Solutions Center, the Kenya Institute of Management. So you're most welcome. Please ensure that you're comfortable, you are able to get your speakers right, and join us on board as we start this very, very important discussion. Now, as we start off, and of course, as we mentioned in last week's webinar, when it comes to public speaking, it's quite a bit of a challenge to almost all of us. And of course, according to most of the studies that have been done, you'll find that people's number one fear is public speaking. Number two is death. Right? You got me right. I said death is number two. Now, does that sound right to you when you hear that death is number two and public speaking is the most dreaded kind of activity for most of us? Well, this means the average person, if you go to a funeral, you are better off lying in that casket, right, than actually reading out the eulogy in a funeral. And that is a great challenge that most of us really face. And so when you talk about the fear of public speaking, this is one of the most common phobias that we people face. And of course, if you look at some studies, they're talking of about 75% of us have this kind of common fear, which is commonly known as the stage fright. So we are quite excited to have you on board. And of course, our speaker for today is Mr. Maxwell Gashui, of course, who is here with us. And the topic of our discussion today is how to wow your audience in public speaking and presentation. But of course, without further ado, I'd like to invite Executive Director and CEO, Mr. Muridhi Ndegwa, to give his opening remarks. Mr. Muridhi, please, your attention.
Thank you very much. Now, we very warmly welcome you to this event of today, which is I think the 27th of the 28th webinar, which is wow your audience in public speaking and presentation. And as always, just to give you a short brief about the topic, and then after that we invite the speaker. We are told that Mark Twain was lauded as the greatest humorist in the United States. And as a writer, humorist, entrepreneur, publisher, and lecturer, he was the embodiment of presentations. And they say you can't do better than learn at the feet of the American master. Further, we are told that Mark Twain entertained audiences around the world with his unique mix of sophistication and homespun humor. He labored long and hard so that his stories could emerge short, sweet, and precisely on point. This is a writer, after all, who say, and I quote, "The difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and the lightning bug," end of quote. So we may ask ourselves the question, what makes the great ones great and the bad ones really dreadful? Because you've gone to forum where you listen to the person and you say, oh no, not again. Is it intelligence, personality, experience, or the lack of social anxiety, or is it a combination of all of these, perhaps? Unfortunately, in our current world, we live too much in a world that is analytical. We talk about manuscripts, we talk about bullet points, we talk about charts, we talk about graphs, we talk about numbers, experimental results, whatever other data that we swear by. And we are very often settled and proficient in these words, in this world, because we've been trained for it. But of course, that is exactly the opposite of the whole idea of public speaking. There's only one true conjurer in this situation, the one who can create magic on stage. And this magician doesn't exist on a screen or notes on a lectern. The magician is, of course, you and me. Only you can bring your data literally to life, so it exists in the human terms that your audience truly understands what you're saying. And therefore, we say that speaking is a live event, a form of community in which you as a speaker embody the text. Whether this is your first speech, or your 20th or 30th or 40th or 50th, on the speaking circuit, you are the living, breathing personification of the ideas that you are expressing. And today we are glad to listen to none other than Max, who will be taking us on the topic of wowing your audience in public speaking and presentation. But before I finish and before I end, allow me just to give you a quote. And this is by Winston Churchill. And I quote, "If you have an important point to make, don't try to be subtle or clever. Use a pile driver. Hit the point once, then come back and hit it again, then hit it a third time, a tremendous whack." And this is by none other than Winston Churchill. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite our speaker. Now, Maxwell Gichuhi, who is a lead coach of MG Consulting LLP. So Maxwell is not your conventional speaker. His uncanny ability to provide actionable answers to today's unprecedented challenges through passionate, entertaining, and impactful keynote speeches has put him in front of many audiences across the different spheres. He uses a dynamic style of delivery to ensure you get inspired, impacted, and entertained. He's a pragmatic speech coach, and he believes that and I quote, "It is a grave tragedy when your mouth doesn't speak the message of the heart," end of quote. He further asserts that this can be remedied easily by effective speech coaching, and to this end, Max has worked with various individuals, including corporate executives, government leaders, and sales and management teams to align their visions with their presentations. On each occasion, he has equipped them to deliver transformative speeches that meet the intended purpose. Maxwell is an enthusiastic Toastmaster. Maxwell is an enthusiastic Toastmaster who has served as a voluntary leader for the world's largest organization for building excellence in communication and leadership, and is able to translate his communication and leadership experience in any situation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's warmly welcome Maxwell. Maxwell, the floor is yours. Karibu sana and most welcome. Thank you.
Asante sana. Thank you so much, Mr. Ndegwa. A few years ago, probably around 20 years ago, I got an invitation to go and speak somewhere. Prior to this, I'd been speaking to young men and young ladies. I was also a youth, and that was my crowd. Then I got this invitation because one gentleman, let me call him an old man because then he was an old man, said that we need to listen to this young man. So I got an invitation to talk to around 1,000 people. Now, my friend invited me for a meeting. He said, there is this meeting that is coming. It was coming in around 2 weeks, and you have been selected to be the speaker. Now, he said the only thing is you need to tell me in 5 minutes whether you'll be in or not. I thought about it. Of course, I was excited. After all, I'd never spoken to a congregation of more than 100 people. So I said, yes. He said, are you sure? I said, yes. He said, are you sure? I said, yes. He said, now you cannot renege again. The only reason why you will not speak in that meeting is if you are dead. And of course, I was so excited about it. I left him and I went home. I got home in the evening, and there's something that happens in the evening. I think it's because the silence around, the stillness, and I thought about it. And I thought, oh my God, around 1,000 people, these are old people. These are, I mean, they are age, my parents' age and above. And I wondered, was I going to be able to speak to these people? I took my call and called. I think those days calling was around 50 shillings. And I told him, I don't think I will make it. He said, remember the one thing I told you, that you cannot renege. That was the only clause that there was. You cannot renege. So after a while, I decided, okay, the best thing I can do is for me to prepare so that I can do a presentation that is worth that invitation. And I got on to do the presentation. But I still had this nervousness. I still had this doubt, these fears. On that particular day, I rose up very early in the morning, chose my best suit, ironed my shirt. Actually, it could have cut you if you touch it on the edges. I went to the venue and I sat at the front. I remember at that time, I was earnestly praying and calling upon God. I don't think there's anyone here who on that day would have been more religious than I am. And I said, God, I would like to faint today. There are many things I've asked you for, and I'll never ask if you can grant me this opportunity to just pass out at this moment. And unfortunately, he did not answer that prayer. So I was called upon to the stage, and I remember there was a flight of steps, around 5 or 6. And I don't know if you know Murphy's laws. There is one in particular, Mr. Ndegwa, that says anything that could go wrong will go wrong. And that's the one that came to the top of my mind, amongst the other things about panicking and losing my voice. And I went up those stairs, and I was afraid I would trip, but I didn't trip. Then I got to the stage. The stage was quite big, I would say around 6 meters or so. Now, today we have what we call snake cables. Probably if we were doing this in a live venue, there would be one snake cable coming from the stage to the mixer. Those days, we had just wires running across. So the 3 guitars, you'd have them twisted together, the microphones, the wires would be twisted together, and they would all crisscross on the stage. I thought about tripping, I might trip on one. So the first one, I was very careful. I went over it, and then I took my eyes to the crowd. And then for whichever reason, I tripped on a wire. I sprawled across that stage to almost the other end. Luckily, it was a big stage. By now, I can tell you, I was quivering, I was shaking, I was most afraid. I went back towards where the podium was. And the good thing is those days, they had podium made of solid wood. And I held on to that podium as though my dear life actually depended on it, and I think it did. I had cold beads of sweat form around my hairline. My hands were shaking. My palms were sweaty. I could feel River Wasonyiro and River Tharaka on my both sides of the armpit. Luckily, I had a good t-shirt, a shirt, and a blazer on top, so that was not visible. My knees were fellowshipping very intimately. Now, I stood at that podium and I looked at the audience. And true to my friend, it was packed. They say that the human brain is a complex organ that can do computations in the millions. Genius, it can do beyond what we've even discovered to today. But they say it works from the day you are born to the day when you stand before an audience. Everything I had prepared in my mind evaporated. Now, I couldn't even remember how I had wanted to start this presentation. So I got there, and according to what I was told later, I said, "Good morning, viewers," and no one responded. Now, at that moment, the little confidence I had sort of now evaporated. My heart was beating like an Indian drum. I thought everyone could hear it. On and on I continued, and after a few minutes, if you've been to the Wilson Airport and taken those small planes, shakily taking off, but we got to the air and things were calm. And I got back to my groove and I continued with my presentation. At the end of it, I finished and people clapped for me. At that time, I didn't know if it was to encourage me or it was because I delivered a good speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have this situation when we get to speak in front of an audience. Now, the challenge is never your content. The challenge is not what you want to say, but the skills required for us to present before an audience, to be persuasive, to be impactful, to ensure that our message gets to the other side. Thank you very much. My name is Maxwell Geshohi, and it is my pleasure and privilege to be invited to this podium this afternoon and to share on public speaking. After that, it has become, after those many years ago, it has become one of my passions, and more so because this is a skill that any person, anyone born under the sun can practice. It doesn't matter if you're young, it doesn't matter if you're old, it does not matter whether you're educated or not educated. Any individual, any soul born under the sun can learn these skills. And I would like to say onset that public speaking is a set of skills that can be taught to anyone. Anyone can learn to become an effective speaker, a great orator, a master orator, or an effective communicator. Allow me to begin with what I consider the 3 pillars. And after that, I will touch on 2 or 3 items in public speaking. I run a course that takes around 7 to 8 weeks. So I will be very honest that I will not be able to share everything that we do in this period. But I would like to promise you that the few gems I will share will help you become a better orator, a better presenter in your next presentation. Someone said that it is a great tragedy when your mouth does not speak the message of your heart. It is a great tragedy when your mouth does not speak the message of the heart. And what do I mean? Many other times, people would stand in front of us. We know they are competent. We know they are the master guru in whichever area they are speaking on. That these people are geniuses in that field they are presenting. But sometimes, by the end of that presentation, when you turn around and ask people, what did you get? Then we realize there was a disconnect, right? So let me tell you, the pursuit of public presentation skills, mastery, and effectiveness in presentation did not begin the other days. But eons upon eons, man has always been in this pursuit to look for this great skill that will make him become a great orator, a persuasive speaker, an impactful one, or one who inspires others. And allow me to go back to 2,800 years ago or thereabout. There was this gentleman who not only discovered these 3 pillars that I would like to share about, but today in our universities we call him the father of logic. His name is Aristotle. Aristotle was a great persuasive presenter, and if you study history, you realize in those days, the men would gather and discuss knowledge, persuade, inspire, and influence. But Aristotle went a step ahead and penned them down in a book called Rhetoric. These 3 pillars that I'd like to share with you have become the must-have essentials in public speaking, in writing, in PR, in political campaigns, or any other campaign for that matter, even in advertising, as I will share a clip later to demonstrate more on this. These 3 pillars are ethos, pathos, and logos. I abbreviate them as EPL, being a soccer fan and a soccer lover. And I'm glad that today I'm not here to discuss my team, but I will tell you, my team is that team that helps you become courageous and learn to travail and forbear challenges, right? So EPL is an easy way for us to remember. And I will begin with ethos. And what is ethos? Ethos is the credibility of the speaker. When you stand to speak before an audience, what gives you credibility? Why should we listen to you? Before my presentation, my bio was shared out that I'm a speaker, I'm a speech coach, I work with TEDx, so on and so forth. That establishes my credibility as a speaker. Prior to the beginning of this COVID period, we would have the Minister of Health, the Cabinet Secretary, that's the word we use today. The Cabinet Secretary would always come and upload information or share with us what was happening, what was expected, and how we ought to behave so that we can survive in this tumultuous time. What gave this person the credibility to stand before the Kenyan nation and talk about it? Two things: his profession, his office, right, and his experience. His office and his experience. Now, ethos is informed by the following. First, your background. Second, your background can be your background and experience. Then your profession, your portfolio or office. Those are the things that establishes your credibility, right? So Mutahi Kagwe would speak as a cabinet secretary. For those of us who can remember, in the Kibaki's regime, he was still there. So he's now back as a minister. That gives him credibility. He knows how the government operates. That gives him credibility. Other times, we had the lovely Dr. Mwangangi. Dr. Mwangangi, of course, is a pretty lady. But what gives her credibility? Definitely not her looks, but her background, her academic background in medicine, and her experience in the Ministry of Health. Those two establish the credibility of that speaker. A tertiary way of establishing credibility is through research. For example, I ran a TEDx licensee in Kenya, and most of the speakers would come and present an idea or a theory that they've been working on or that has been researched on. And what gives them credibility to share that idea with the world? Research. Research, right? When I stand before the lecturers at KIM to present my thesis, what will bring me before them? The research done on that particular project is what gives us credibility, all right? And this is also done in our offices. For those of us who are in the corporate world, you stand up as the marketing director or the head of marketing, and you're giving a presentation on where the company is going in terms of sales. You give it based on your office as the head of marketing, all right? So ethos is very critical, and I would like to say something, and thank you very much, Mr. Ndegwa, because you established my credibility before I came, which is very important, so that when I come in, I don't go back to what you said, but I rather dive into my speech, and later on, I will expound more on why, all right? So if you're an MC, if you're running a conference, the primary work of the MC is to establish the ethos of the speaker before the audience. That's the primary work, right? And I'm saying this because I've been an MC, and most of the times people think the work of an MC is to make us happy and laugh. But I want to say that may be the case, but the primary purpose of the MC in a conference, in an event, is to establish that credibility, right? Once we've established that credibility, we move on to pathos. Pathos. Now, pathos is derived from the same Greek word, where we get our English word sympathy and empathy. Pathos is derived from the same Greek word, where we derive sympathy, the English words sympathy and empathy. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all matters emotion. This is all matters emotion. Emotion is very important, considering that human beings are psychomatic beings. In fact, research has established that emotion is very important because most of our decision in buying and analysis is based on our emotions. And I would like to give an example before I go to what is in store to empower us to empower pathos in our presentation. Most of us, if I asked, how many of you have heard of Martin Luther King Jr.? Right? I'm sure if we're in the audience, I'd have probably 80 or 90% hands raised. Most of us do not know when that speech was presented. And I will tell you it was presented in 1964, right? Most of us do not know that on that particular day, Martin Luther King was not the only speaker. They had people from different bodies, the civil rights movements, the clergy, the white representative. They had various groups represented, and every speaker was given 15 minutes to speak. But today, we remember, I have a dream. I have a dream that my 4 children, all right, and on, and probably most of you will recite it better. What happened after that particular speech? Well, one of the things that happened is there's an influence to the Civil Rights Act on that day. These people had been pushing for their rights, the right to vote, the right to equality. And a persuasive speech does exactly that. It actioned people to move. It actioned things to happen. It actioned for a Civil Rights Act to be put in place. Ladies and gentlemen, for us to be persuasive speakers, for us to be influential speakers, for us to be impactful speakers, we have to inculcate pathos in our presentation. In fact, let me quote one gentleman who said this: oratory is the ability to talk people out of their sober and natural opinions. Oratory is the ability to talk people out of their sober and natural opinions. We must get to that place. When we speak, if you are giving a persuasive talk, then action will take place after. We must get to that place. If you're giving an inspiration talk, I will not wait for you to finish before I jump out and go and act. We must be people who will present impactful speeches that will cause the society to stop bad behaviors and get our country right back on track. Power has words. Words have power. And words are probably the most powerful tool the human soul has today. And that is why words today can start a war. And it will take words to bring that war to an end. Pathos draws its might from storytelling, use of vivid and descriptive language, rhetorical devices, among others. Pathos draws its power or draws its might from storytelling, use of vivid and descriptive language, rhetorical devices, amongst others. And allow me to expound just a bit. Every time I stand to speak before an audience, you have to engage both my mind and my heart if you intend to inspire or to persuade me, okay? If I went to Parliament with a policy, it doesn't do it justice to be good on paper. But I have to be a persuasive speaker to be able to persuade the other lawmakers to pass that bill. Now, the two tools that I'd like to share just a bit: storytelling and use of vivid description. Let me start with vivid description. I always say, when you're doing a presentation, don't tell us. Let me repeat that. When you're doing a presentation, don't tell us, show us, right? Let me give an example. Last year, things were not as challenging as they are this year. So I happened to go to Diani, South Coast, and our beaches are some of the best and finest in the world, right? Let me tell you about my visit to Diani. Every morning, I would wake up before sunrise just to see the sun break out of its nightgown. A beautiful sight to see. The breeze would whisper in my ear as it passed through peacefully. The meals that they served, especially the pilau ya Mombasa, was one to die for. I remember getting into Bakra, and the aroma of that pilau almost knocked me down to my knees. I got to my seat and I sat at the table, and they served that pilau. A spoonful of that pilau caused every sense on my tongue to stand at attention as though there was a parade. Ladies and gentlemen, not only was it sweet and pleasant and palatable, but it was healing both to my stomach and to my soul. I smiled after every meal because of that satisfaction. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to give you a vivid description of my trip to Mombasa, rather than saying, yes, I went to South Coast Diani and it was fantastic. Every time you're doing a presentation, endeavor to show us. Touch, speak to us. Let us hear the taste. Let us feel the smell. Let us have a touch. Let us sense. Let's use the 5 senses in our description. That brings it alive. Then I can guarantee you that most people will remember that presentation. I had one lecturer at University of Nairobi called Dr. Nyandemo. And every time he taught on a particular principle, he would give an example, and his descriptives are still vivid because I can remember them. Remember, research shows that every time we do a presentation, people will retain around 25 to 50%. So it is important, it is paramount for us to seek for ways that will make the retention of our audience, or take the retention of the audience to a higher level. So we use vivid description and storytelling so that these people can remember. Most of you, some of you are older than me, and some of you are younger than me. But let me address the older generation. Remember, when we were growing up, values and the principles that our community and our parents wanted to share with us were weaved in storytelling. Why? So that we remember. And true, today, it could be 30, 40, or 50 years later, most of us can remember those stories. Most of us will remember those principles, and probably the story was shared once. Storytelling is another aspect that helps to reinforce your message, and most importantly, will help your audience remember. Okay? So storytelling is important, and Kindra Hall, a great author and a communicator, said, why storytelling? Because our DNA comes inbuilt with storytelling, and we love stories. Today we watch movies, they are stories. I can talk about Godfather, the movie, and most of you have watched it, but it's from a storybook, right? So storytelling becomes a very key aspect for us to be able to establish pathos. Remember, we want to be persuasive speakers. We want to be impactful speakers. Last and not least, on the 3 elements of public speaking, the 3 pillars, is logos. It is the last, but it is not the least. It is actually equal. Let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, your last presentation, how were you building your speech up? Were you using the brick and mortar of logic and reason? Right? Were you building your speech skillfully so that your audience can easily follow, comprehend, and understand? Right? We ought to build our presentation like an adroit master builder. Stone, mortar, stone, mortar, stone, mortar, in a way that your audience can follow. The intent here is to let your points seem so straightforward and commanding that your audience cannot conceive of an alternative, right? Every time we speak, our intention is to be so straightforward and for it so easy for the audience to understand that people cannot misunderstand you, all right? I do believe most of us are from this country that I'm in, Kenya, and we've had incidents where someone does public speaking, and then tomorrow the media reports what they said, and then they say, I was misquoted, all right? Or better still, they would quote George Snow, who said, those things that the media said, I did not say them, right? I hope none of us will fall in that pallet. Our idea is to be so straightforward, building our persuasive speech with reason and logic so that everyone follows it, right? So passion is important. I mean, pathos is important, but pathos does not exist in a vacuum. It does not exist in a utopian nation. Pathos is built using words, using logos. So it is important for us to build on our diction. It is important for us to build phrases and learn phrases that are common with the people we want to address so that our message cannot be misunderstood. Or most importantly, because we are pursuing to become a persuasive speaker, the audience cannot conceive of an alternative to what we are presenting. Ladies and gentlemen, those three pillars are the pillars that are the foundation of any presentation, public speaking, advertising, PR, communications, and campaign. Tomorrow, if you're one of those people who's going to campaign in my village, remember to establish your credibility. My people are farmers. They do dairy. How can you establish your credibility? Okay? Remember in your next presentation to use emotions, because emotion is key. I would like to share a video. Give me a second. Allow me to share this video.
Maxwell, is there a way we can get the sound? I don't know whether it's projecting on your side because we are not seeing something coming.
Sorry.
We saw your screen at some point, but the video is not showing.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thanks.
Let me share with Paulina. Are you there?
Yes.
Pauline, could you assist me in sharing the same?
Evening.
Evening.
May I ring that up for you?
Yes, please.
Have a good evening.
Repeat after me. A. And C.
C. E, B, C, D, E, F, G.
No, not good. Not good.
Just the sounds that words make.
Cat, dog, calamari. Trash on the beach.
Oh, good, good.
Farm fresh. My son and I mowed the grass.
That's a gold star.
Gold star.
Unbelievable.
Dad,
Hey, Tubbs, I read your book.
you read my book. Barman, give that man a bell.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you so much, Pauline, for the assistance. Now, remember what I said about pathos, that research has shown that emotion is very important in our information processing ability and decision-making ability. This advert, you don't get to know what the advert is about until we are only 10 seconds, I think 18 seconds to the end. So what advertisers do, and you can check other adverts, is they realize in the center, at the core of decision-making and information processing is pathos. So they've come up with a story, right? And again, storytelling picks. So there's this young man who has written a book. He went out, made the dad proud, went to Kim University, got his degree, and now he's written a book and is about to launch the book. And what does the father do? The father goes out of his way to ensure he studies. He goes through Gumbaru, he gets to learn, and is able to read. And by the day the son is graduating, he tells him, I have read your book. Now that's the whole story, okay? So I'm sure most of us are glued there. We can identify with the family love, you know, and the extra mile. And then at the end is when he says, give this man a beer. So all this time, these people are communicating, giving us a story, hooking us in, weighing us in, and then we get to the end because information, because emotions will aid in our decision, in our ability to make a decision. And that's what advertising is all about. If you can remember some of the few, like Coca-Cola adverts, especially at this time of Christmas, they would bring adverts that will show a family coming together, coming from the distance, coming home, and us celebrating. And that is the reason why. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope that those three pillars have established our cause, or have established what we need to lay down as the foundation for our ability to be persuasive and impactful speakers, right? So allow me to touch on three things. Like I said, this cannot take, we can't do everything, but I want to share a bit. I wanted to establish this was our foundation. Then now we can move on. Tom, I don't know if there are any questions or I can take them in concluding.
Thank you, Marcus. Well, I think we are moving well, but of course, as we move, I think from the chat box, there are certain questions or comments, like from Mildred Kasandi, talking about, there's a question there, should public speaking involve presentations? I know most of us are used to seeing PowerPoint and all that, which again could also be, monotonous, but all that is fine, because you see, you've taken us through your part without even a PowerPoint presentation. So I think just the normal way where people feel I must have a PowerPoint to be able to speak. I think that is a notion that can be challenged, but then it's a question that is coming through whether we must have PowerPoint presentations always when we are, making those presentations to the audience. And then the second question to that, doesn't PowerPoint presentation reduce the monotony? So probably, as we've talked about the ethos, the pathos of public speaking, I guess the members also would like to hear something about effective presentations, where you are not really publishing a book on a PowerPoint slide, but of course just being effective in terms of what you pass across. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you for that question. But kindly allow me to tackle it at the end, because I want to share on 4 things. I want to talk about what I call the anchor message, and then structure, and then the use of slides, visual aids, and props. So I will tackle it at that particular point.
Thank you.
And then if time allows, we can do one more. But those 3 are what I had planned for this evening.
All right, thanks.
Right, okay. So let me start with the anchor message. And let me throw a question to all of us. How many of us have been in a meeting where someone is called upon? Say Mr. Ojode has been called upon, or Mr. Gishoy has been called upon. Maybe they're expecting or they are not expecting. Then they come to the front. All right. Habari zenyu, wananchi, habari zenyu, asanteni sana. Leo sina mengi, yangu ni machache mno. Hata sikuwa na la kusema, lakini niko na machache. And then 22 minutes later, they are still speaking. And when you ask the people around, because you feel like you're lost, what is Mr. Gishoy talking about? What is Mr. Ojode saying? No one seems to know, right? I'm sure most of us have had probably that encounter. Now, the reason why this happens is the reason why I train on something I called an anchor message. An anchor message. Anytime you need to do a presentation or a slide, decide first and foremost, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? Even if you're doing a presentation, it could be a marketing presentation, it could be a pitch. What is your key message? Write your key message, okay? You can expound it in 2 to 3 sentences. And I would like to say, without fear of contradiction, that if you cannot share your message in 2 or 3 sentences, you cannot share it in an hour. And I will repeat that. If you cannot share your message or presentation in 2 to 3 sentences, you cannot share it in an hour. Tom, we run the TEDx franchise. And one of the things I always tell people, send me your idea in not more than 250 words. And I can tell you there are many letters we will get that will have 500 words, and I can't tell what that person wants to share on the TED Talk platform. So I always say, if I can't get it in those 250 words, the audience will not get it, even if we give you an hour, although we'll give you 15 minutes, all right? So before any presentation, it is important for one to write down or have it clear in their heart and mind that this is what I would like to do. And let me give you an example. Let's say, Tom, I've invited you for my son's graduation. He's just graduated from high school, and you're the uncle, you've come in. And I say, Uncle Tom is here. Uncle Tom will share a few remarks. Now, you see, Tom, there are many things you can talk about. You can talk to him about the future. You can talk to him about choosing the university or what he will do in the university or about his past. There are many things. If I don't decide when I'm seated down what I want to do, I might end up being that person who says, I have very few remarks, and then you hog the whole meeting, right? So it's important for me to decide, I want to talk about his diligence. And so I'll come and say, Mark, I love your diligence. We've always been proud about your diligence. And now everyone here knows what we know, that you're a diligent young man, and your graduation, your certificate speaks for itself. But I would like to encourage you that where we are going, you should not retract and you should not go lower. In fact, if anything, tighten your belt and continue in that persistent diligence, right? That's my story. And I will establish it with either a testimony or a story and say, you also remember your uncle so-and-so, he scored good grades like you, and he went to the university and did better. And in 1982, he was the best person in the University of Nairobi. So Tom, Mark, we are looking towards you continuing in that diligent spirit. That becomes very easy, okay? So anchor message for me is very important. And I use the word anchor. I coined that word anchor because I have not come from the coastal region. So the ship and the seas are not things that I was accustomed to or knew how they operate. But I realized when you have a ship, and let's say my friend Bill Gates is coming to Kenya and he wants to meet Joho in Mombasa for 4 hours, and he comes in driving his yacht or his boat. When they land there, they park, they will draw down the anchor. So what the anchor does is to stop that ship or that boat from going towards Tanzania. So 4 hours later, when he comes back, he will find the ship at the same place they left it. Why? Because the ship is anchored. And that is exactly what an anchor message does. So I could be doing a speech for 45 minutes or 5 minutes, but having that anchor message anchors what I will share about. Today, my anchor message is on us. It is on us becoming wow presenters, communicating with impact. All right. So I could share it in 5 minutes, I could share it in 1 hour, but that's my core message. And that's where most people lose the plot, because once we lose that, then we are lost. Now we will remain as the ship that was parked in Mombasa, and 6 hours later will be found in Tanzania, right? Then once we've established what I want to say in 2 to 3 sentences, we now come to structure. Now structure has 3 segments that I would like to share. The first segment, as we all know, is introduction. The first segment is introduction. But I have this theory that it takes you 2 to 3 minutes to hook in your audience or lose them. It will take you 2 to 3 minutes to hook in your audience or lose them. What do I mean? If I got to the stage and I started explaining, oh, you know, Mr. Ndegwa, there was traffic, our internet was down, I just got this invite yesterday, I'm not even prepared. What are you telling the audience? That they are not worth your time. They're not worth your time, okay? Then the other thing is sometimes I will come and we have these funny jokes in my village. And I've not traveled outside my village in Nairobi, so I don't know many other cultures. So what could be funny in my village could be very offensive in your village, all right? So there are some of the things we need to do. So we must be very intentional, and we must be very careful about what to do with the introduction. So I want to split it into 2, the introduction. And I'll always emphasize with those that I train that the introduction is so important, you need to internalize it. When you get to the front, you should not read that introduction, because the first thing you need to do is establish your contact with the audience, all right? Once you establish that contact, come confidently, and how you begin sets everything on the podium. So I will come and give an introduction. Like I said, 2 to 3 minutes. Now, I usually say, if you're writing your speech, we speak at 120 words, 125 words averagely. So some of us are fast speakers, others are slow speakers. But for us to communicate effectively, I always encourage that we speak between 100 and 110. The reason why I say that is because when I'm listening to a speech, when I'm listening to a speaker, I do not have the same advantage as when I'm reading a book. When I'm reading a book and I come across a passage that is interesting, I can stop, pause, take my glass of water and sip, then read it again. Unfortunately, when we are doing a presentation, we do not have that laxity, right? So it is important for us to speak at a pace where the audience can easily follow us, understand what we are saying, comprehend, and for them later to remember what we say. So your introduction, if you're writing it down, you need to have around 200 words, right? 200 words is equivalent to 2 minutes. So remember, the work of the introduction is this. If you're coming from the lake, I don't know how we fish, this way, and then come out with the fish. Your work is to hook in your audience. That's the most important aspect of introduction. The second part of the introduction is for us as the audience to understand what it is you want to share about, right? What is it you want us to share about? So tell us what you're about to tell us, right? So introduction has two components. The first one is to hook in the audience. Now, to hook in the audience, we can use several tools at our disposal. The first one is the use of a story, anecdotes. Someone said, people who tell their own stories will never lack a hearing, right? So you can use a short story, what we call an anecdote. You can use a startling fact. For example, this speech today, right? I decided to start with an anecdote. That was very intentional of me. If you're there at the beginning, you realize I didn't say who my name was. I didn't say what organization I'm coming from. I didn't say many other things. I came with my own personal story, right? And then now I can come to the introduction part. But that has already been done. So you can use startling statement, you can use startling statistics. For example, the other way I could have started the meeting is to say that the fear of public speaking, or what we call glossophobia, is a great malady that has affected many destinies, denied many people opportunities to go to the next level. In fact, research done at Stanford University said that 7 out of 10 people fear public speaking more than death. 7 out of 10 people fear public speaking more than death. So that would mean today, if this was a funeral and I'm standing at the front and this is the podium, that most of us would rather be in the casket than be in front of the microphone, right? So for me, that's an introduction. I'm hooking us in. You now realize 7 out of 10. So, okay, I'm not the only one. So you look around. So in this class, if we are 100 people, it means 70 fear public speaking, right? So that's a bit about introduction. Then the other important bit is the conclusion. Once you've done your introduction and the body, which I'll come to, we go to your conclusion. Your conclusion is also very key and very essential. If this was a pitch, I'm looking for funds for my NGO, I have to be very, 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 very intentional in what I'm going to say at the end, all right? So if it is a call to action, I have to be deliberate about it, the words I want to use, how I want to put it across, all right? So your conclusion is very important because, again, it has these two components. You reciting, in a nutshell, what you've told us, and finally, you leaving us with something that is memorable. Your conclusion should always remain etched in the audience mind so that the next time they meet you, they will say, ah, Mr. Ojode, I remember you. I remember what you said. And they will quote your conclusion, right? So if you're doing a pitch, you have to be very deliberate at the end. You finished your presentation. Don't do many other things. Give give us the summary and call to action. Or if you finish the way I want to finish, then I can give a quote that every time you remember public speaking, it will come to your mind and inspire you to do something, right? So that's about conclusion. So when it comes to the introduction and the conclusion, kindly always try to write it down and internalize it, so that when you're giving the call to action, please don't look at your notes. You've convinced me, you've persuaded me of what you're doing, and then now you want to conclude. Allow me to try and demonstrate, right? Then I say, so it's been very powerful, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to conclude. Yeah, I am calling you to action. I am calling you to action to please give to our NGO the 200 million that we've been talking about. I'm sure I don't sound convincing. And I'm sure that's not the pitch you want to do. So your conclusion is very critical. Maybe because of statistics, you are reading notes before, but when we come to conclusion, establish that eye contact, be deliberate in your words and speaking, move at a pace where people will hear you, and be very clear and lucid about that call to action or the last quote or a phrase that you want to leave us with before you hand over to the MC or the person who's in charge. Then I come to the body. So I want to share two ways of how we can present our message. And remember, every time I'm talking about presentation, it's synonymous of a public speaking or a marketing presentation or any other presentation. Whether you're doing a pitch, you're marketing, this works for all of us. So now when we come to the body, one of the idea we use at TEDx is have one idea. So you can have this idea and you can use this method. You have the point, you have the reason, you have the example or testimonial or statistics or research or a journal to reinforce what you're saying, and then summarize the point again. So the acronym is PREP. Let me try and type it here. PREP is the acronym. So share your point, right? Share your point, expound on it, then give us an example. I mean, give us the reason, expound on it, all right? Are there theories for and against? Are there debates for and against? Expound that. And then give us examples or testimonials or research or statistics to reinforce what you're saying, all right? So you're saying that this flower that is found in Nairobi can cure COVID, right? So expound to us and give us scientific statistics and research to validate what you're saying, okay? You've given a pitch, you want to raise funds for your NGO, right? Give us testimonials of what your NGO has done in the past, the impact it has achieved in the society, then reinforce on the point. So that's what I call a prep. So whether you have a 3 minutes speech or 15 minutes, you can use that. And it's very good, especially if you have 5 minutes. Just take on one point, expound on it, give some testimonial examples, and then recite that point again. The second way is where we have the body, we have the main topic, then we have the subtopic. So you probably have the main topic, you have the subtopic, you discuss it, and then you come back to the main point, expound on it more, and then now go to the second point. So it's more like prep, but this one will give you more advantages if you have to talk for 45 minutes. So I can have point A, point B, point 3, or I can have one main point and 3 sub-points, just like I'm doing in the second edition of this presentation, okay? So the main points, the sub-points are anchor message, structure, and use of visualizations and slides, all right? So that's the other way. So ensure that you begin in your introduction and say, today I want to talk about anchor message, structure, and use of slides for an effective presentation. Then I will describe anchor, expound on it, give examples, right? Maybe I have 2 things under anchor, or I have 2 points under structure. So go to one point, define it, do the same, and then come back to this other point, define it, do the same, all right? And then we conclude. So a structure is very important. Reason being, like I said, when people are reading, they can write notes, all right? They can stop and go back. If they don't understand the main point, they can go back to the beginning of the chapter and see, okay, this is what we're talking about. But when doing public speaking and presentation, they do not have that advantage. So it is very important for us to structure our message because it helps our people, the audience, to follow easily, understand, comprehend, and remember later when it is necessary. Okay? So that's in structure. Finally, the use of props and visual aids. Now, I will confess that I have slides for this particular presentation. And COVID has pushed us into new dimensions where today we are doing keynote speeches in front of a screen while seated. But I want to say this. If you are the person who cannot do your presentation without the slides, then you've lost the plot. I want us to remember visual aids, props, and slides are not your presentation, and they will never be your presentation. Okay? If they were, most of the times, then this keynote speech, Tom, I would have sent you the presentation. They are there to reinforce what you're saying, to complement what you're saying, but they are never your presentation. So that's the first point. Your visual aids, and I'm calling them visual aids because you could be using slides or you're using something different, or you're using a prop. I could come in this meeting, maybe come with this stapler and say, your life is like this stapler. You need to impact people, anything, all right? So those props are not your message, okay? There's a video that was going around, and it was about this particular preacher who was trying to explain to his congregation that we need to be beautiful on the inside than we always try to do on the outside, okay? I don't know how many of you saw that video. So what he did, he came dressed in immaculately, debonair, sharp-looking gentleman. And he was preaching and was preaching. And then he removed his jacket, and we realized his shirt was torn. The hands were torn, right? It's like those people in high school who one day the headmaster says, remove your sweater, it's too hot. Then he realizes you have no shirt. So of course, I can't forget that, all right? But you see, that was not his message. It was to reinforce that message. And it did reinforce that message because I'm discussing about it. So anytime you're preparing, ensure your message can be complete with or without power, with or without slides, because your message is not the slides. The second thing I would like to introduce in the use of slides is the rule of 66, right? And okay, there might be some exemption for this rule, but let me give it first. There is a book written, Death by Bullet Points. Some of us write 25 sentences in one slide. So what happens? When you're presenting, I am busy trying to read what is in the PowerPoint. I never get to hear what you're saying, all right? So the rule of 66 says this: use 6 lines in a slide. 6 lines in a slide and 6 words in a sentence. Use 6 lines in a slide and 6 words in a sentence, all right? That is if you have to use the lines. More often than not, I encourage for people to use images because, I repeat again, the message is not in the slides. The slides are to reinforce what you're saying. So more often than not, we lose our audience because we've got too much on that slide. So sometimes, based on where I'm seated, I'm not able to read. I'm trying to strain and read at it rather than give you attention, right? So use the rule of 66. Thirdly, don't have more than 2 fonts, 2 to 3 fonts in any slide, all right? Don't have more than 2 to 3 colors when you're using a slide or a flip chart, okay? So these are basic rules even in branding, if you're doing branding. Okay? Don't fill different fonts, different. That leads to more confusion than us understanding or reinforcing what you're saying. Thirdly, you don't need to fill the whole slide. White background is nice, and 1 or 2 images is more than enough. When it comes to slides, the rule I use is say, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, right? So remember, when you're preparing those slides, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So don't fill all the colors of a rainbow on that chart. No, 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 no. This is not a painting, all right? Don't fill 24 lines in that chart. I can't even read, okay? And most importantly, please don't read from your slides. When we are presenting, one of the key things we always insist is ensure you keep your connection to the audience. And that's why today I didn't want to use slides, right? So that I'm presenting and everyone can focus on me, right? Always ensure your connection to the audience. You're looking to the audience, you're connecting with the audience, so that sometimes maybe I'm too fast. By observing my audience, I can tell. Or maybe I said something that works for me in my village, and probably it's not even an English word. So I can see from the puzzled look, and I can go back and expound, right? So always try and maintain your connection. If you're using slides, let your laptop be somewhere you can see, or you have another set to follow, so that you're always focused on the audience, right? Sometimes we spend 40 hours on the flip chart and we lose the connection, okay? So remember, the slides, visual aids and props are there to empower our presentation. They are not the presentation. And in case there's a blackout or I can't use my laptop, I can still give my full presentation, right? So those are the rules for slides. Please follow the rule 66 and ensure your presentation. Remember, your presentation is not in the slide, right? So Tom, at this point, I can respond to a few questions or clarifications or queries.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maxwell, for that very wonderful presentation. I think now we are better informed, of course, much more better where we are in terms of understanding how to be good public speakers. You've just also confirmed, you know, what we said right at the introduction, that you know, people fear public speaking. In fact, it's the #1 fear, and death is second. And of course, we've seen, you know, listening to you, it's quite clear that at some point I was wondering, I think you're one such person that turned fear into opportunity, because now you're doing it for a living, and that's quite encouraging. Now, sometimes we get fear, we get phobias, and we feel like, you know, that's a no-go zone. So it's quite clear to all of us that some of those things that we see as dreadful fears could actually be opportunities for us in business in one way or the other. So thank you very much. We really appreciate. I think what we'll do is, of course, when you are making your presentation, you are able to tackle quite a number of questions that our members asked well in advance.
Yes.
Especially areas of building confidence, particularly the last bit of PowerPoint presentation. I think that has come out very clearly. Just like going through the list that I have, I just want to check if there's something that maybe did not come out so that you can clarify.
Yes.
Now, I think there was a question about how can I hone my public speaking skills. You've actually mentioned that, but there's also the question of any recommendations on public speaking, short courses from practical perspective, not just theory, because you've actually shown us all this. So some of the members are asking if they want to be good public speakers like you, Are there certain programs that we can work around in partnership with you? So I think that is something that is coming up. You'll be able to address that. Then there's a question about, which of course is not clear, the tragedy of one heart, when one is not able to speak on matters that are in one heart. I don't know what that's all about, but
okay.
If you can shed some light on that.
It's our class motto. We say it's a great tragedy.
Okay.
Maybe they wanted to get the quote again. It's a great tragedy,
yes,
when the mouth does not speak the message of the heart. It's a great tragedy when the mouth does not speak the message of your heart. And maybe just to clarify on it, Tom, what I mean is this. In fact, let me quote Lily Waters. Lily Waters says, the success of your presentation will be judged not by the knowledge you send, but by what the listeners receive. And that's what I was saying at the beginning. We have people who are, when it comes to their area, they are rich in content. Let me say they are gurus in their area, adroit in what they do. But now when it comes to expressing themselves, there's a disconnect. And this happens for various reasons. And I think maybe I have 5 minutes, Tom, that I can add something else on the body language, okay? So the disconnect comes, number one, because we are not clear in the way we are doing. We don't have structure. So maybe you began at the north corner, you came to the south, you came back to the north. So you lose us because we can't flow. And that's why I say structure is very important. And anyone who's serious about presentation must always prepare their speech, write it down, and just go through it. Because the other thing that happens, Tom, and let me say this because I know I'm talking to a lot of academicians. When I'm writing something, the language for writing is different from the language of verbal communication, right? So I could write and it will make sense, but when I read it, I'm thinking, no. It's not coming out the way it's meant to, okay? And that's why sometimes in one of our classes, we train on writing for the ear. So there's writing for the ear. When you are writing your presentation or speech, if I'm sending my pitch to Mr. Ndegwa, there's a way I would pen it down. But if I went to his office, there's a way I would verbalize it, because writing for the ear and for the eye is different. Right? So I always say write down your speech so that you can read it fast and hear it, and also bounce it off someone so that they can say, Maxwell, you're thinking in your mother tongue, right? That sentence is not correct. So that when I come to prepare, I can present something that is perfect, right? So I want to bring in an aspect of body language because this also leads to a lot of disconnect. You see, when people come to the front, your body communicates, and people have never understood that their body speaks. So I want to give an example that I watched on the news several years ago. And this gentleman was a minister, and today he's a governor. And I don't know what had pricked him. I don't think he was very happy. But he came for a press conference. And this is how it went. I'm very, very happy. I'm very, very, very happy. Yeah, I'm very happy. So, of course, Tom, it doesn't take a genius to realize that gentleman was definitely not happy. And as much as that sounds very simple and very easy, most of us in our presentations, there are cues we do with our body that conflict with what we are saying or do not work for us in our presentation. So it is important for people to know that your body speaks. And how I put it is this way, that your body language must be married to your verbal communication. Your body language must be married to your verbal communication, right? So when I come in and I say I'm excited, my face needs to show I'm excited, all right? And your face does speak. And you know, the limbic movement is faster than our words. So most of the times, the reason why we do polygraph, Tom, is because when that question is asked, your body responds before you can speak, right? So we need to prepare how we are using our body to reinforce what you're saying. Remember, Most of the time, we will retain probably 50%. But with the use of visual aids and the proper body language, we help people remember more. Okay, so if I was in it was a live audience, I would probably do my introduction different, and I will try to demonstrate how on that day it was. Because when you go home, you will remember more because you remember seeing how I was doing it, right? The converse of it, or the challenge with it, is when we overdo it, right? So I don't want to come and say, I came running, I stopped, I was shocked, I clapped my hands, I shouted hallelujah. No, okay? So now your body language is not communicating, it's become a distraction. Because remember, the primary way of conveying your message is verbally. Body language, visual aids are to reinforce what you're saying. Okay, so it's important for us to learn how to use our body language. Okay, if I came here and I'm pointing at people with my finger like this, then of course you feel offended, right? But if I say I'm inviting all of us, you feel the warmth and the invite. Okay, so the reason why I say your body language can be a distraction, if I came here and I'm talking and I'm clasping at my hands, what does that communicate? Maxwell is nervous. Why is Maxwell nervous? Maybe he's not prepared. Okay, so allow me to demonstrate, Tom. So most people come and they're speaking and they're doing this, or they're tagging at their trousers, or they're playing around with their rings, and you do this for 45 minutes. And Tom is wondering, what is Maxwell doing? So you distract your people. You're the one distracting your audience. All right. Sometimes they say you want to hold this piece of paper at the front, and then you know you're shaking. And the more you tell your brain to calm down, the more the paper shakes. So now you're creating a hurricane in the room and you're distracting your audience. We have what we call cue cards, scratch cards that you can buy from the supermarket, and just put your notes so that when you're reading, you can check. And of course, you're writing pointers, not the whole message. Because I guarantee you, when you're reading your whole presentation, then you've lost your audience. So we put pointers to guide us, to lead us, but we try the best we can to maintain the eye contact. So your body language must be married to your vocal language. Now, Tom, to conclude on what you're saying, we do offer a course, a 7-week course at Maxwell Geshoy Consulting. It's an LLP, 7 weeks course. And the key thing about this course, it has to be practical. I can talk here every other week, Tom. You can invite me every other week. I can dive into every principle of public speaking. But if we don't practice it, then it becomes of no use. If we don't practice it, it becomes of no use. So public speaking is like golf for those of us who are golfers, or like swimming for those of us who are swimming, or like driving, especially those of us who learned how to drive a manual car. It seems complicated, but once you learn the principles and then you keep doing it and keep doing it, then you become better at it, right? It doesn't matter how old you start playing golf. The first time I went for a golf trip, I saw an old man, and you know, he wanted to play with me, but I could tell he was just trying to make me comfortable. But let me tell you, when he takes that swing, then you realize age doesn't matter. And it's the same with public speaking. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. We can learn it at any stage. We can learn it at any stage. And the key to public speaking is practice. The more we do it, the better we become at it. All right, so we offer that course. The next class will be in February, and I will share the flyer later. We also have Toastmasters in Kenya and East Africa, and anyone can join any of the clubs. We can go to the Toastmasters website, Toastmasters East Africa's website, and get to see which club is near. And of course, we can always partner with Kim to do things. But the core at it is learn, practice, practice, practice. And then once you've prepared your presentation, practice, practice, practice. Tom, let me tell you what I'm doing today. If you came to my neighbor's house and knocked them and told them, how do you wow your audience? I'm sure my neighbor can repeat this presentation because I have to practice, practice, practice.